Thank you very much, Lily, and welcome friends and colleagues, and thank you very much for joining us today. Kind of waiting to have access to control the slides, so Moses still don't have it.
You should have control now, Bill.
There we go. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Sure.
So very quickly, I may not know everybody, but I'll give you a little background, and then I'm going to give my colleague, Dr. Banks, a chance to give us his background. So I'm Bill Greer. I've met many of you, maybe not all. Currently, I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Research at the University of Michigan, oversee the Animal Care and Use Program. I've been involved in this type of work for 30 plus years now. Part of my career was with a pharmaceutical company making animal vaccines. Part was with Penn State University, and most recently here at the University of Michigan. Ron, you want to take a minute?
Sure, I'm glad to, Bill. I'm a little bit older than Bill. I've been around a little bit longer than Bill, and we've been working with each other since about 2006-ish on several initiatives. The UPT has been a driving issue for us for quite some time, building off the best practice meetings and hearing what IACUC administrators around the country have been struggling with. I'm currently at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, serving as Director of the Division of Comparative Medicine with a faculty holding a professor in the Department of Pathology. Back to you, sir.
Thank you. So very quickly, and if some of you have already heard some of our information, then we apologize, but just going to give you a very, very quick overview right now, then go through the slides. So Ron and I have been on this initiative for a few years, a couple of years before FDP engagement. There are some critical points along the way that brought us to FDP and the establishment of a subcommittee to work on this more for our community. Along the way, USDA became involved. Axel and OLAW was involved in the beginning, and I'll give you some of that update. So we have had a lot of subcommittee meetings. We're making progress. I'll talk about that more. But I'm going to give you some background first. So I apologize if you've already heard this. But anyway, how did we determine that we needed a UPT? I will tell you that years and years ago, Ron and I brought up the idea of developing a universal template for the community. And at that time, there was some notion that institutions were so diverse that a universal template probably wouldn't work. So it resurfaced again for us about 3 or 4 years. And at that point in time, our community was very interested and it got things kicked off for us. I'm going to talk about some of the general goals behind the UPT, talk about ways that we're getting input from the community, ways that we've already received some input, and also FDP involvement, and then obviously the status update, next steps, and then our anticipated timeline. Then we'll have some opportunities for question and answer. No need to wait to the end. If you have questions along the way, please speak up or put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them as we move along. So again, the first idea behind this universal template was imagined about 8 years ago. And this was during best practice meetings. So if you're not familiar with our best practice meetings, Ron and I have been holding these since 2006, and it's basically just collegial conversations, around the table, focusing on specific topics and subjects, and just ideas for getting things going. We thought about doing this first in 2016, so we've been working on this and gathering a lot of information since then. In 2017 and 18, we worked a lot through our best practice meetings and through our colleagues that attended those meetings to get input and ideas for next steps or for what a universal protocol template may look like. A couple of years ago, FDP and the IACUC Administrators Association partnered on this project, and we have been working as a working group and subcommittees of FDP since that time and making some progress. It's important for us to reiterate that this has been a long-term effort and a long team effort. Ron and I have been gathering all kinds of information from administrators through the years and through the IACUC Administrators Association. We published a lot of these ideas that were shared by many of you and all of our colleagues in the IACUC Administrator's Guide to Program Management. So this too has given us some ideas on what a universal protocol template would look like. So as we went to the next step, we partnered again with FDP, and this allowed us to bring in academia, industry, the VA. We have members from DOD, OLAW, and the USDA. All are part of our FDP working group, and we are looking at our template form and revising it and getting it ready for user testing and eventually for publication to our community. The idea behind this document is with the understanding that probably 85% and maybe more of our users, our PIs, are using mice and rats. So our initial feeling was that we could customize this toward rats and mice and include a lot of statements for that species users just to check off common practices that are used on a regular basis in those species. That's not to say that this document will not accommodate non-rodent rat mice users, but it is to say it's tailored toward them, and it allowed us to look at some of the common procedures people do and publicize them in the UPT. This also recognized, or we also recognized, the opportunity to team up with the CUSP project and their subcommittee. Elaine will talk about that soon, but it too can be incorporated into this UPT with the idea that some of these universal procedures that are used beyond rodents and maybe in some cases for rodents can be easily incorporated into the document. One of our main initiatives was to cut down the regulatory burden and only include in this document things needed by the IACUC to conduct their review of the animal activities. Many times we've heard folks at our meetings talk about information gathered in the protocol form that the IACUC really doesn't need to review the animal activities, but we're gathering it for maybe an administrative reason or some other purpose. The idea is let's remove as much as we can and keep it simple for PIs to fill out and IACUCs to review. You'll see us use check boxes for some of the procedures, and these are things that have been defined by our community. In other words, how do you do gas asphyxiation for euthanasia, whether it's CO2 or isoflurane. We found ways to word it that basically says the same thing that all of us are intending to say, my apology. At the end of the day, the idea is to keep it user-friendly for all, not just PIs, but also IACUC members, IACUC administrators, and anyone else. Quick disclaimer, OLAW and the USDA are involved in helping us to make sure this document will satisfy all the regulatory requirements. And that's not to say that OLAW or the USDA will expect you to use this. It will not be mandated, but it will be a resource that's available to the community through the OLAW and or IAA website. So keep that in mind. Your input is valuable. We want to hear what you're saying. But just because we're working on this, that doesn't mean there's going to be a change in the regulation that requires you to use it. Critical point. So where did the document come from? So whether you're aware of it or not, there have always been, or at least for many years, an animal study proposal available on OLAW's resources page. Axel, who is part of our group, is also on today, played a key role in developing this document with the idea that he would include as much information as possible so that if you used it, you could decide what was applicable at your institution and what was not. So it is and was intended to be a catch-all and covered everything from biosecurity and background of various species before they're shipped into the institution, portions of the veterinary care program, to actual procedures that are conducted on the animals. So that was our start. And Ron and I pulled this off, brought it out, shared it with the community, and we basically used it as a starting point, refined it down to the point where we brought it to FDP and started our project with the FDP group. Let's see, did I go the wrong way? Okay, talked about this some already. It looks like a duplicate slide, my apology. But again, the idea here is for us to keep it user-friendly and make it applicable to all. And all would be PIs, IACUC members, administrative compliance administrators, IACUC administrators, your environmental health and safety group for safety reviews, whatever is applicable across the community. So the requested information, the idea was that we would make sure it was consistent with regulation and policy. So once we develop the questions, we want to review and consider the question's primary purpose. So is the information necessary to ensure a robust review of the proposed animal activities? Is the information related to compliance, but not necessarily something that is related to the animal activity? And is the information managed by another agency within your group? Perhaps the Occupational Health and Safety Office or the Biosafety Committee. So these are the three things that we want to look at every time we consider putting a question in the document, and then we can talk about it down the road. Consider the wording of each question. This is the other thing we want to do. We want to make sure that it is simple, easy to understand, it's straightforward. No guessing games for PIs. They can either check a box or they know black and white what needs to be there. The IACUC knows what to expect. And it's an easy conversation or an easy training for an administrator when they run across a PI that's never submitted before. Is the format logical? We wanted to try to divide it so there is an administrative information section. Obviously, there are some things we need from an administrative perspective to make sure we gather the info required for a protocol. PI's name, contact information, personnel that are on the protocol, maybe grant information, things like that. Information that we can only get from the PI and no other place. However, it may not be information the IACUC needs to review the animal activities. And then some of the traditional things that you're all familiar with. What are the research objectives? How are animals going to be used? The actual animal procedures, are there any departures that we need to be aware of as a committee as part of a protocol? And what hazardous materials are being used, and which will help us to facilitate the hazard review and and other requirements. Question reviews. So as we write the questions, the idea is to get input from OLAW and the USDA, and we're doing this through our subcommittee. We have a VA and a DOD person on the subcommittee as well who are weighing in, not only from a community perspective, but also from a VA and a DOD perspective. We want PIs and IACUC members involved. So we want to make sure the document satisfies the needs of all. And importantly, we want to make sure that it meets the regulatory requirement. When we get to the final document user testing, we want to have researchers take a look at it, tell us if it makes sense, tell us what needs refined, what we could do to help make it more applicable or easier for them to use. Obviously, our veterinarians still need to be able to get the information they need to ensure they can assess animal needs and follow what's going on in the vivariums. Then administrators need to be able to get the administrative information to get it in the systems. know where, for example, animals are going to be used if it's outside the vivarium. Could be in Ron's lab or someone else's lab. We need to have a way to gather that info. We want IACUC members to be able to use it effectively. We want to make sure they can read it and understand what's happening to animals, you know, from initiation to euthanasia or to termination of the project. And importantly, we want to make sure it makes sense to the compliance directors and they can relate it and connect it to other things that are going on in the compliance division. So let me talk a little bit about the progress that we've made so far. I've already mentioned that we developed the initial draft through the IACUC Administrators Association. We've divided the UPT into various sections. We've talked about that, the administrative sections. One section will cover departures, another section covers justification for animal use, and then another section covering procedures, examples like that. We've provided all the sections to the subcommittee for comments, and we've gathered comments independently from each of our subcommittee members, collated all the comments into a common document, and then shared it with the working group. Since then, we've been holding Zoom meetings to go through various questions and giving every subcommittee member an opportunity to weigh in, help us with the information that's there, the wording of the document, and more importantly, get it ready for user testing. So during the Zoom meetings, what we've been doing is going over the working draft. We pull specific questions out and we go through them and spend some time, usually 1, 2, 3, up to 3 hour segments, and we just consider every question and we consider it from each user's point of view. With the idea that we can come up with a final draft to send it out for the user testing. And as mentioned, these are the parties that we want to make sure have an opportunity to review and provide comments from a user testing standpoint on the final document. As soon as it's finished, we'll make it available to the community. We'll be able to bring it to an FDP meeting and go through it in more depth, question by question with some of the logic, and make sure that as a group we understand it and we're familiar with what's going on. So our timeline, we're hoping and still hoping, got our fingers crossed. Ron and I would like to see this project done, as well as the other people that are involved. We have progressed through most of the document. Last time that we looked at it and talked about it, we were on the experimental design question, doing some tweaks there. Next subcommittee meeting, we will continue through the experimental design to make sure we're all on the same page with that, and then start looking at specific procedure questions. We will continue to update FDP at future meetings. October 2021 being our next, and then finally a wrap out year where we've got our fingers crossed that if we're not finished with the user testing, we're at least finished with the document and it's with the users and we're getting some refinements from them. And that's primarily what I have. Any questions, or Ron, anything else you want to offer?
I'll add in addition to Bill's expert presentation that while not mandated, we do hope most institutions find at least some procedural or methodological means by which you can improve your own protocol process. I think most of us would agree that over the years we have rather bloated up our review methodology, sometimes to our institution's detriment as well as the research community's detriment. So if we can de-bloat some of the regulatory oversight, which one of the reasons STA and OLAW are closely associated, to be sure we don't de-bloat and create a regulatory non-compliance. But if we can de-bloat some of our institutional oversight, it would certainly make life easier for many and research may be more productive for most. There's no doubt it will not work everywhere. It's not intended to work everywhere, but it is a way to update what Dr. Wolf created several years ago as a place to start. And for the large, robust, well-engaged institutions, it might have little value. For the moderate-sized or even smaller, or starting institutions or institutions that are recognized as being somewhat dysfunctional, it might have substantial value. So the intent is to try to bring everyone's attention back to a realm of looking at what is necessary to assure we meet laws, regulations, and policies, assure the well-being of the animals, and get the heck out of the way of researchers so that they can move ahead smartly with their research initiatives. What questions from the community might y'all have, or comments or encouragement you'd like to add?
See one question, Ron, from Leslie. She's asking how FDP institutional representatives can get involved with the user testing piece. So, I mean, multiple ways. You can send either Ron or I an email. We want to find, you know, a diverse representative group. You know, some from universities, large and small, maybe CROs, maybe pharmas. Ron, we haven't really talked about it much, but that's what I'm thinking. Any input is valuable. So send me a name or send Ron a name and we'll see what we can do.
I'd be more than happy to sign you or your institution up, no question. How long is the template? Nicholas asks. The current one is 25 pages long. SUNY's making an online form, but it's likely to be bloated and they keep finding problems, so they delay the release. Sounds like welcome to modern technology, doesn't it? Some of the things we struggle with consistently. I don't know how long the template's going to be because we haven't finished it at this point, but we are trying to minimize the size of the template by maximizing check boxes or guidance language, minimize that by utilizing Elaine's CUSPs, again, to minimize the size of the document. There isn't anyone who says we should shortcut what should be a very robust review and oversight process. But if we can de-bloat that process and get down to the important questions, the serious questions, that indeed would be ideal. So I'm not sure how to answer that question, Nicholas. How well is the template interface with the DoD version? A good alignment would save PIs a lot of time and effort if it's easy to compare. You're absolutely right. And I'm confessing one of my prior lifestyle sins. I was part of the DoD for a long time, and I did work on that version back 1,000 years ago. In terms of interfacing, probably not a whole lot. Well, let me rephrase that. Probably not 100%, but certainly a substantial amount. One of the challenges that any sort of universal protocol template has are the regulatory foundations that guide that particular document. So from the DoD's perspective, there are certain DoD regulations that require certain questions and approaches that are not necessary for civilian institutions. And so those would be complete disconnects. The same might apply for the VA. There are certain VA guidances in their Handbook 1200 that are not necessary for civilian institutions. So once again, it'll be discongruent. But at least if we can get something that everyone can look at, maybe we can all find ways to make it work better. How are you dealing with justification for animal numbers? Is that included? Yes, it is included. There are several ways with which to justify animal numbers, and that too could be a series of maybe not truly codified check boxes, but possibly short answers or several options or reviews by statisticians in the review of the proposal. But the short answer is yes, it is part of any sort of protocol assessment. It's a required regulatory step. Other questions?
Still recognized too, I forgot Mary Lou, she is part of our review group as well, and she represents NASA. So we've got a good, wide, diverse group of organizations and institutions involved. We will let you know when the user testing is up and ready to go. Anyone else before I turn it over, or we turn it over to Elaine?
Okay, Elaine, solve our problems.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine Kim, and I'm here at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. I added Aubrey's name here from University of Washington. She and Sally Thompson-Aritani over at UW in Seattle are the ones that are usually present to you all on the FDP updates, but due to some scheduling issues, I'm pinch hitting for them. I am part of the steering committee for CUSP, which is a compliance unit standardized procedures working group, which now has a steering committee, and the working group, I guess you could say we have monthly check-ins. If you want to be part of that, you can always email the group email at cusp@thefdp.org, and we will get you sorted out and added to the monthly meeting calendar. We do that by Zoom. So what I'm going to do here first, next slide, please. What we're going to do first is listen to Aubrey's wonderful audio recording of the demo she provided at a previous meeting last month. And it's about 13 minutes long. What she's going to go over here is just walk you through the demo site right now, so you can get a feeling for what is being developed and worked on. This is in a testing phase, and to clarify, this is a database for people who want to join on this database to put in their committee's approved protocol procedure information, and it's organized in a certain way. This is not a pre-approval or anything. This is just a database of information that various IACUCs have approved, okay? So why don't you write your questions down while you listen, and then at the end of it, I can answer some questions. I do have a couple of slides after that, but we'll have plenty of time for the questions, okay? Let's go for it.
A brief demonstration of our test site. Please note that while the test site is a wonderful proof of concept, it's still a work in progress. We'll start our demonstration here on the login screen, where you'll find a brief description of the CUSP project, a spot to enter your login credentials, and a link to request a new account. For this demonstration, we will log in as an institutional representative, which is a user role in the system with read and write access. Each institution participating in CUSP will be required to have at least one individual with this role. The home screen that we land on has several features that we want to look at. At the top of the screen, you'll find the main navigation menu, which includes sections for About, My Procedures, My Accounts, Reports, and Help. The top right of the screen, you'll see the name of the currently logged in user, a link to your user profile, and the option to log out. The body of the home page includes a table of all procedures within the system. The table includes some basic information about each procedure, including the ID number, the procedure name, several actions that can be performed from the home page, the procedure type, which are some general organizational categories such as euthanasia and sample collection, species, the name of the institution that added that procedure to the system, and you'll notice that institutions have the option to display or not display their name when creating a procedure, the date that that procedure was added to the site, and the status, which will include options for active and archived procedures. In the Actions column, you'll find several functions that you can perform from this table. First, you'll have the ability to endorse or unendorse a procedure. By endorsement, you're saying that your institution uses this procedure as it's written. Our hope is that this feature will not only reduce the number of duplicate procedures within the site, but will also help you select procedures that are of interest to you. So for example, if you're looking for a particular behavioral assay in mice, you might be more inclined to select a procedure that's endorsed by maybe 10 or 15 institutions than one that's only endorsed by maybe 2 institutions, since that first procedure is suggested to be a more common approach or best practice for that assay. You'll also be able to bookmark procedures that are of interest to you so that you can more easily find them in the future. A list of procedures that you've bookmarked will be found in your user profile. And last, you'll have the option to flag a procedure. By flagging a procedure, you're sending a note to a system administrator, letting them know that you think a procedure needs to be reviewed. Examples of reasons why a procedure may need to be flagged are simple things like typos, or if you think there is something within the content of that procedure that needs to be updated. Users will have two options for searching for procedures within the database. The first option is a simple free text search, where you can enter keywords or phrases of interest to you. So for example, if we wanted to look for procedures related to blood collection, we could enter the search term blood, click search, and the table will populate with procedures that are related to our search term. The second option users will have are pick lists. This feature is still under development, but will include broad categories where users can select attributes of interest to them. So for example, if we were interested in searching for procedures around euthanasia, we could simply select this procedure type, click search, and the procedure table will populate with procedures related to this procedure type. Users will also have the option to combine these two search functions, allowing them to further refine the procedures that they're looking for. As an example, if we were looking for blood collection procedures in rodents, we could enter our first search term of blood, and then select rodents as a more general category from the species pick list. When we click search, our procedure table is now populated with procedures related to blood collection in various rodent species, such as mice, rats, and hamsters. Now let's open a procedure record. So the procedure record that we open describes a blood collection from the tail vein in mice. At the top of the procedure record, you'll find some basic demographic information about the procedure, including the ID number, the procedure name, the procedure type, which are those general organizational categories that I mentioned, species, contributing institution, and some important dates, including the date submitted and the date last modified. Then, in the body of the procedure, there's a brief description of how that blood sample is collected from the tail vein, as well as information related to the timing of sample collection and the volume of blood that will be collected. Procedure records will also include a field for keywords, which the user will enter, and these keywords will feed into the free text search feature that we saw on the home page. Similarly, the substance type will feed into the search features that we saw on the home page as well. Other functions that you see within the procedure record include the same endorse, bookmark, and flag procedure that we saw on the procedure table on the home page. Additionally, there'll be the option to download procedures from within the procedure record. This feature is still under development. And lastly, you'll notice this envelope icon. This function will allow the user to contact the contributing institution to ask questions related to this procedure. Now let's exit out of this procedure record and return to the home page. Next, let's look at two pages that are only available to institutional representatives, the My Procedures page and My Accounts page. We'll look at My Procedures first. As an institutional representative, one of your responsibilities will be to add procedures to the CUSP site on behalf of your home institution and to manage those procedures over time. You can perform both of those functions from the My Procedures page. To create a procedure, you'll simply click this link, Create Procedure, to be taken to the Procedure SmartForm page, where you can then complete the various fields that we saw within the procedure record. There are also several options for managing procedures associated with your home institution. The first is a simple search feature that you can find at the top of the My Procedures page, and you can refine that search by field of interest. Then, within the procedure table, you'll notice that there are several actions available to you. The first action is a simple copy procedure. As the name suggests, this activity will allow you to make an exact copy of a procedure that you can then edit and modify to your liking. The next action available to you is Archive Procedure. Archiving a procedure will change the status from active to archived, indicating that the procedure is no longer active, that your institution no longer performs this procedure as described. The procedure will not be deleted from the database and can still be searched for by other users of this system if they so choose. The last activity available to you is Renew Endorsement. On the home page, we mentioned that you can endorse a procedure. That endorsement is only good for a 3-year period. As a procedure approaches its expiration date, the institutional representative will be sent reminders about the upcoming expiration. This will prompt the user to log into the site and review that procedure. If everything still looks good, they can then click on this Renew button, which will then extend the endorsement for another 3-year period. Now let's look at the My Accounts page. As an institutional representative, your other responsibility will be to create and manage accounts for individuals from your home institution, and you can perform these functions from the My Accounts page. On this page, you'll first find a table of current accounts associated with your home institution. In this table, you'll find the name of that individual, including a link to their user profile, their account type, which will include community member, which is a read-only user role, an institutional representative, which is a read and write user role, as well as the current status of that account. If we open a user profile, you'll see all of the relevant details associated with this user, including their account ID or email address, their name, and other relevant details. From this page, you can also activate or deactivate an account if it should no longer be active. From the My Accounts page, you can also create a new account by clicking on the Create Account link. This will take you to the Account SmartForm, where you can complete all relevant fields for that user. And last, there's a table of account requests that are associated with your institution, where you'll see the name of the individual requesting access, the date of the request, and the ability to approve or deny that account request. Executing these activities will send an automated notification to that user about your decision for their account request. Let's go back to the home page. The last section that I would like to share with you is the Reports page. On this page, you'll find several reports that are available to the institutional representative. The first report, Procedures at My Institution, lists all of the procedures that are associated with your home institution and includes some important information such as the date submitted where applicable, the expiration date, as well as the status of that procedure. And this report will include procedures that have a status of archived, active, or pending. The next report that's available to representatives is the procedures my institution has endorsed, which will include a list of all the procedures.
Was that, are we having some audio issues?
Moses, I don't think the video was over.
of that account. You'll also note that all of these reports are downloadable to Excel, so you can easily filter sort those reports as desired. Well, that concludes our demonstration for today. Thank you very much.
Great. So could we go back to the previous slide just as a point of reference? So I did want to pause to see if anyone had any questions. And while we wait for questions, I did want to give a little more background information for those of you that are new to looking and seeing at CUSP. Again, this is the Compliance Unit Standardized Procedures database, and these are going to be procedures that various IACUCs or animal welfare committees have approved at their own institutions, and we are storing them in this centralized database. We're going to start out with FDP members, and when we do the pilot later this year, and I'll go over the timeline in just a second. But if this is something that you feel your program, your committee, your veterinarians are interested in, you can email cusp@thefdp.org, and we will get you into the group email and the monthly meetings where we give updates and progress, and you can give your input in on the development of this database. What I also wanted to mention is that the way that you use this information is solely up to you. I can give a couple of good examples of the different ways that the institutions participating now in the development are thinking about it. So for me at Colorado State University, I am using it as a resource for my office, for the veterinarians, and for the IACUC to inform us as we move forward in reviews of protocols. It is not something that we feel our researchers are needing right now directly, but certainly then if a new researcher or student or a committee member asks for information about what do people typically do for this, I will go to the database in CUSP and do a search, and I will look and then generate a report and then have it available for the IACUC's discussion or to provide to the researchers as appropriate. Other programs, other institutions are going to make it freely accessible to their researchers. They feel that that is the best way to go about it for their program and their committee and their system overall. Other programs are going to make it solely available to the veterinarians or to the attending vet and the veterinarians that report to them. So those are kind of the three different flavors I've seen so far. And certainly I'm sure there'll be other permutations of that. And definitely what it means is that just because it's acceptable at one program doesn't mean that your committee needs to accept it the way it is written. And that's the thing. If you take it and you adjust it slightly, you can then provide the information and your version of it and put it back into the system, because this is very much a cooperative give and take, where whatever you take, there's the understanding that you will eventually give back into the database. Okay. So why don't we go to the next slide, please? So this is the kind of long-term project timeline that Aubrey has had up, I think, for quite a few of the updates. So right now we are in the alpha testing. We're right towards the end of it. So here are a couple of things that are going on right now. We still have a couple of bugs that we have to work out in the testing site, which that you saw and heard Aubrey's recording. And our IT team, we're still trying to sort out some of the staffing on that. And so basically, we are right on the cusp, you could say, of ending alpha testing and beginning the beta testing. As you can see, there's just been a small handful of institutions for this alpha testing, and Aubrey definitely kept in mind the types of programs, so the type of people that were doing this, so that she had kind of a wide what's it called, sample set, even in this small alpha testing phase. So the next step is beta testing, as you can see here on the next step slide. And so here we're going to go further into the procedure information and specifically taking data out of the system and what it looks like. One of the things for the procedures is typically there will be a parent procedure with child procedures. So like I just described to you, where someone will take the procedure, do their own thing with it and put it back in. That could be the child procedure to the parent procedure. Okay. And so some of these organizational structural things in the database are going to get sorted out with a wider set of institutions testing it out. And I can tell you these are different institutions than the alpha testing group. So if you want to be a beta tester, email cusp@thefdp.org and then we can help you out. One of the things I do want to mention here as well in terms of how to participate in other ways on CUSP, we have teams right now, and one of them is the help desk team. The help desk team is the person that's going to respond to that group email that I keep using. And they're also going to be the customer support, so to speak, for when institutional representatives ask for an account to CUSP, and also onboarding them. And so I am one of the co-chairs on the help desk team, as well as April Ripka at Penn State. And so if you are interested in joining a team such as help desk, and we also have education and outreach, we have IT support, and we also have QA. Right now, I think help desk could use the most assistance now, because as alpha and beta testing are getting kind of underway, we are putting together the documentation for the training material. And so that's what we're working on now alongside all of this. Okay. So as you can see, the next step after beta testing, hopefully by the end of this calendar year, will be the pilot phase, which we will open up to about 15 to 20 institutions. And this is the last phase we'll go into before the go live. And so I just wanted to mention some of the things put in here. The pilot phase will allow us to start using any documentation that we've set up to see how effective it is in answering questions. And also if there are any other bugs or issues that we encounter through these testing phases. And as Aubrey put in here on the go live, it will be open to the FDP community, which is at this point, or at the point when she was making this slide, about 200 institutions. And then it'll be open to larger research community later on. And so again, each institution can choose to use this database the way that they want to. Some of you who have online systems, there should be an API developed by the IT team so that you can integrate it into your online protocol system in some way, but that solely depends on just the IT infrastructure at your institution for your protocol system. I know for some it works well, and then others it can be a little buggy. And so if that's something you want to find out, we can let you know when we're at that point of the development, because I don't believe we're at that point right now. Other people, you might just want an Excel spreadsheet to download, and that's something that you can obviously do, as you saw in the demo. I see a comment in the chat. Any feedback from Jove regarding using their library and whether this would harmonize with CUSP? We have not heard back from Jove yet, Carol, but that is on the list of to-do things to follow up on. And that does remind me of two more things I wanted to update you all on quickly. So what Carol's talking about, Jove, is this online journal for video education, I believe. It's the video format used to kind of demonstrate procedures, I believe, and it's really great. And so we were reaching out to various partner organizations and groups that might have kind of this overlapping education training goal and how it might align with CUSP. And so we are reaching out to places like Jove and also Jackson Labs. And I think there's another group that we're connecting with as well. The other thing I wanted to mention is the cephalopods. So knowing that there are more researchers who are using cephalopods in their research, some of them reached out to CUSP to find out, could we use this database to start housing some of our best practices? And then a way for us to kind of compare and contrast. And so alongside all of this, cephalopod researchers and users have met to kind of see how CUSP could help them. And some of the information they want to contain have to do with husbandry and veterinary care. And so just recently, a meeting happened and they discussed this and how we can try to incorporate it into CUSP. And while it's a little bit outside of what we had expected, we did find how this would be very additive to the conversation. And so I did want to mention that in case there are any cephalopod users. And yeah, I think I'll pause there if there were any other questions. I do know that this slide deck and the recording, I believe the CUSP has a website through FDP, and on the education and outreach page, there should be a link to this this slide deck and the recording, because it's from the Primer IACUC 2021 meeting. And if it's not there now, they're working on updating the website. And so if you missed that or have questions, it should be available on that website. And I'll try to find the link and get that posted here. Were there any other questions? I'm not sure if... No, you all good? Okay. Well, again, if you do find that you have a question later on, you can email cusp@thefdp.org and I'll get back to you. And I know that Aubrey and Sally wish they could have been here. And so I appreciate your time and for listening in. And Lillian, I'll hand it over to you.